Well, it's quite amazing over the last 25 years that we've cut childhood death in half. We've got polio that was crippling over 300,000 children a year. Last year it was 70. We're down to 2 countries that we need to get done with. And innovation is on our side, whether it's new vaccines, new drugs, more productive seeds. Basically, the world is getting better. Davos appropriately doesn't focus on the good news. It focuses on refugee challenges, economic imbalances, but that's how we make progress.
And what about the year ahead? What about 2016? Davos is also a place where delegates get together and try and plan their priorities for the year ahead. What are the priorities for the foundation in the year ahead?
Well, with luck, this will be the last year that we'll have any polio cases. Pakistan and Afghanistan, we're really doubling down there, getting good cooperation from the governments. And we're not certain, but we're very close to the end of that disease, which will make it the second one ever to be completely eradicated. We have very ambitious goals for getting new vaccines out to kids. Places like Nigeria and India, where a lot of kids haven't gotten them, we've got good new programs where we're able to track what's not getting done and make sure that gets fixed. We're at the start of a 15-year period where the goal is to once again cut childhood death in half, to take it from 5% of kids who die under 5 to 2.5%. And with the kind of innovation we're seeing, we think that's very possible.
What's your biggest frustration with the march of progress? What's going too slow in your opinion?
Well, it's always hard to get good governance. You've got corruption, you've got short-termism, you've got a lack of pressure to adopt best practices. We do a lot of things where we highlight the countries that are doing things well to try and accelerate that. But governance is always a limiting factor, and particularly in Africa, sometimes you get quite weak governments. It's generally true in poor countries. You don't have as many people to draw from. You're not able to take as long-term point of view. But the trend is still positive despite that challenge.
Now, you run the biggest charitable foundation in the world, which has a fund that's bigger than the GDP of some small countries. How do you decide which issues to focus on, which issues to give priority to?
Yeah, our resources, although very large compared to the average foundation, are not so large compared to the big governments. So we need to partner with the US, the UK, France, Germany, all the big donors to take on issues like HIV. We pick the greatest inequity. Parents want their children not only to survive, they want them to get enough nutrition so that their brain develops, so they can be educated, and so they as a family and their country can get out of the poverty trap. And over the last 50 years, countries that were very poor, Brazil, Mexico, Thailand, even South Korea, have now come up, and we have all these amazing middle-income countries. China's the most amazing of those, and parts of India have done well. So we just want to get all the remaining countries up. Improving health is so catalytic to that. So Africa, Pakistan, India, still some work to be done, but it's to really accelerate the very positive trend over the last 50 years.
But you do evaluate a list of causes by which ones you think are most severe, most worth the foundation's money.
That's right. And once we pick a cause, like we're going to make sure we get rid of malaria, the next disease after polio that we'll go after in a serious way, we stick to it. We get a lot of top resources, and there we're saving lives for less than $1,000 we put in. All our health stuff, we've got to have that type of incredible effectiveness, because that's what prioritization is all about.
Now, one of the big discussion points this year at Davos is what's being dubbed the fourth industrial revolution. The idea that the world of technology, which you helped create, will increasingly cost people their jobs, and the people who will suffer most are the poorest in society and women. How do you feel about that prediction?
Well, as I said, it's not the first industrial revolution, and so we cost a lot of farmers their jobs, these tractors and more productive seeds. I mean, it's amazing how many farming jobs we got rid of. The U.S. Feeds itself with less than 2% of the population. And that's really a very good thing. Until we can take our labor, and every old person's well taken care of, every handicapped kid has round-the-clock support, we can take labor and do great things with it. So anything that allows us to make the goods we're making today with less labor, that just gives society more options. Now, government has to be good about retraining people, having the right tax structures, but when you have shortages, that's what's hard. When you have industrial advances, that's how you can take something like the aging population and still have the increased productivity levels to be able to support people in retirement. And eventually, you can get to the point where the working week gets to be less than it's been in the past.
Now, finally, the big issue, probably the biggest issue here this year, is the refugee crisis. And unlike many of the causes that the Foundation works with, this isn't a cause that can be solved by money alone. What's your take on the refugee crisis? What needs to be done this year?
Well, we give money because those refugee camps, you've got to make sure medicines get to those kids. Ideally, they're still getting some type of education. The capacity is very, very strained, and it's great to see some governments being particularly generous. We just announced a cholera vaccine stockpile because often you'll get infectious disease outbreaks in these camps because people are in crowded, tough living conditions. And so, at the heart of it, you eventually got to get stability so people can go back to their countries. We are seeing that countries that have developed well, like Ethiopia, that used to be a source of refugees, now they've taken in more refugees in Africa than any other country. And that is partly because we've invested in agriculture there. The government's had good policies. So food productivity is up very dramatically, over 50% the last 5 years. And so it's given them some capacity to take, in this case, Somalian refugees mostly, and give them a place and be able to feed them in a good way.
But economic development will stop some refugees. It will stop economic migrants coming from places like Ethiopia, but arguably it won't stop people coming from Syria and Afghanistan and other war zones. Would your message be to governments that they, in those cases, need to do more to help those people, to take them in?
Well, certainly I think the U.S. Should set a better example by taking more refugees in. We should have the capacity. Even though it's not easy, I think Germany and Sweden are to be congratulated for being more of an open door approach on this thing. The total number of refugees is not like a world record. The political sensitivity about refugees and the tightness of the budgets is what making this one particularly acute.